where basically the US and the Qatari and the Egyptian work out a deal to free some hostages, at the same time free Palestinian prisoners, and stop the war for a few weeks before the war resumed. And from that point until recently, there were many attempts to try to bring about a ceasefire and an exchange of hostages and prisoners. However, whenever there was a deal that seems to be close, Netanyahu would break it, and whenever the Zionists make some concession, Hamas comes out with asking for something different. So basically, it ended up in the last 2 months that Biden put all his weight, almost, I should say, all his weight to try to get a ceasefire and to get something ongoing, get more aid to Gaza, at the same time more weapons and money to the Zionists. That was the equation. In fact, he went on to make a stupid statement. A president should not make such a statement, that by Monday there will be a ceasefire. That was the Monday before Ramadan. A president should not make such a statement, a declaration, until and unless that it's for sure. Otherwise, people do not take you seriously next time when you say something will happen. But in actuality, the US tried its best to have a ceasefire before Ramadan. And we explained before that the reason for that move was the Arab countries that are working closely with the US and with the Zionists at the same time. They asked the US in December that the Zionists can do whatever they want in Gaza until Ramadan. By Ramadan, we have to have a ceasefire, because they thought that there would be some demonstration or some movements in the street in the countries that surround Palestine. And Biden put his weight, sending Blinken and sending the CIA director and so on and so forth, and even discussing bringing some of those Zionist ministers a discussion. It did not go anywhere. And Ramadan started and there was no ceasefire in this regard. Now, there was a dispute between the army on one side with the internal security, Shabak, the outside intelligence, Mossad. They stood on one side against the police when it came to what to be done in Ramadan, because they wanted to be sure that they will not have trouble in the West Bank and in 1948 land and Jerusalem during Ramadan. So for those who do not know, I mentioned before quickly, there are 4 types of Palestinians, Christians and Muslims, as far as the Zionists entity in Palestine are concerned. Those who live in Gaza, and of course Gaza now, there's no way out of it except through Egypt, and you have to pay tons of money to get out. There is the Palestinians in the West Bank, and there is almost a closure on the West Bank before Ramadan. People cannot go to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, they cannot go to Jerusalem, they cannot go to the 1948, and of course they cannot go to Gaza. So it was a big jail. The West Bank, which has about 2.2, 2.3 million people, was like a big jail, except that you have two jailers, not one. The Zionists on one side and Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, on the other side. And both of them were really doing killings of Palestinians in the West Bank. Of course, the Zionists doing more, but Abbas and his cronies, who were no more than agents doing the bids of the Zionists, they were also arresting people and in some cases assassinating some of those people that are quote unquote with the resistance in this regard. So there are the people of Gaza, there are the people of the West Bank. Third, there are the Christians and Muslims who are Israeli citizens. So basically they have Israeli passports. Those are the people who stayed in 1948 in their land, in their homes, and did not leave. There are about 20+% of the Israeli population. Again, about 2.3, 2.4 million plus or minus that are in the 1948 land. Remember that the Zionists in 1948 expelled 650,000 Palestinians from their homes. A small percentage stayed, and those became the 1948 Palestinians. And then there are the Palestinians in Jerusalem and its surrounding who do not have Israeli passports, but they have what's called Hawiyat Quds, Jerusalem residency, that give them many rights that are different from Gaza and the West Bank. Those people did not accept the citizenship, but they have certain rights and they do pay taxes to the Israeli government, just like the 1948 people. So when Ramadan started in this regard, the police headed by the extremist right-wing Ibn Ghafir came with the suggestion that we do not want anyone from 1948 or the West Bank, they said zero, to come to Jerusalem and Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And the army and the Shabak and Mossad, as we said, Shabak is the internal mukhabarat, intelligence, and Mossad is the external. Everyone and the army agreed that this is a dangerous suggestion. It will inflame the West Bank and 1948 Muslims, because Ramadan is a Muslim occasion. But there were also Christian holidays that the Christian could not get to Jerusalem to celebrate in this regard. So the government ended up making a decision that favors the army, the Mossad and the Shabak against the extremist Ibn Ghafir and the police, that they're going to allow people from the 1948 to go to Al-Aqsa as they wish, but with the West Bank, they will allow only men above 55 years old and women above 50 years old who have so-called, Hawiyya Mumaghnata, meaning a residency that had a strip in it, just like the credit card, so they can scan it, and you have to have an app and apply for a permit. So while I was in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa in the 3 weeks, not many people could make it from the West Bank because basically they did not provide many permits. But from 1948, people came, again, not at the same numbers. So by the end of Ramadan, they were happy that there was not a significant, um, escalation. Um, Except that in some areas in the West Bank and villages that surrounding the north and cities like Tul Karim and Jenin and camps, that there were some fights and there were many fighting with the settlers. People who are settlers, there are about 850,000 settlers in the West Bank and Jerusalem area. So those people were cutting the olive trees, they were shooting at people, they were stealing their sheeps that they have, and this and that. So basically, that's how Ramadan went. But during that, there was still an insistence by the U.S. of trying to find a ceasefire with the help of Qatar and Egypt. But some new element came where there's an attack on Qatar. So you find Israeli ministers attacking Qatar and saying Qatar has been supporting Hamas, Qatar is financing Hamas, Qatar is cooperating with Hamas and this and that. Now everybody who is familiar with the situation, they know that the Israeli government, specifically Netanyahu, wanted Qatar to send money to Gaza every month. So basically, there were minister visits from Qatar who would come with the knowledge and the agreement and the cooperation of the Zionists and bring money and give each family at least $100 per month, and bring some more money here and there for some projects, for hospitals, for what have you. This was by the encouragement of Netanyahu and his government for more than 10 years. Now you might ask why? Because Netanyahu and the right wing, who are now in control, and they have been in control for a while, but the last government is the most extreme, they do not want something called a Palestinian state. And to cut the bridges toward the Palestinian state, they said that best thing is let's build Gaza with Hamas separate from the Palestinian Authority. So we have this division to continue and grow. So nobody will come and says, oh, we can establish a Palestinian state, Gaza and the West Bank are together. That was the plan that Netanyahu has. And this is not a secret. Now, if you read the Israeli press, they keep blasting Netanyahu. You are the one who have supported Hamas all those years. You are the one who brought Qatar to put so much money in Gaza in terms of helping people, which eventually, of course, would help Hamas directly or indirectly. So at this point, we have seen, meaning at this point in Ramadan, this attack by the Israeli government ministers on Qatar. Now, why is the attack? Because Qatar is playing a major role in this negotiation. And make no mistake, Qatar is not an independent country that functions the way that it wants. Qatar is a small country, very small. You know, in the Middle East, they joke about Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait. They said, you know, if you start accelerating your car, you know, by the time that benzene, the gasoline is finished from your acceleration, you are on the other side of the country. Of course, that's sarcastic. It just tells you how small are those countries. Tiny Bahrain in the sea. It's an island. Tiny Qatar. Tiny, you know, United Arab Emirates. I mean, those countries really very, very small. Now, why they are countries and why they are, because basically that's how the British decided. That they have oil, they have resources, so the British sponsor the emirs and the princes and the kings, just like they did with the Sauds, the Al Saud. This is a production of the British. Just like the Jewish entity in Palestine is a production of the British too. So we are still looking at remnant from the colonial era. So Qatar was criticized about 4 months ago in Washington, D.C. by the Zionists and their supporters. And basically they were saying, Qatar also supporting the Taliban. And the Qatari government issued a statement through Washington, D.C. embassy saying basically, it's the U.S. government that asked us to open an office for the Taliban in Doha. You see, the U.S. asked Qatar, bring the Taliban and open an office for them. And the Zionists knows, they know this is what had happened, that Qatar is only doing this on behalf of the U.S. And it was the U.S. that told Qatar, bring Hamas leadership and host them in Doha. So that whenever they need to talk to those people, they have a channel, which is the Qatari government. This is the reality. I mean, this is not secret. The Qatari government has had issued a statement, official statement, through the embassy for those critics in Washington, D.C., because many of the American people do not know this information. So when the Zionists and their supporters in Washington, D.C., and they start saying, this Qatari thing, they are supporters of Taliban, they have an office for the Taliban. So wait a minute. You guys asked us to host the Taliban and open an office for them in this regard. So this attack by the Zionists on Qatar now was aimed at what? Let the Qatari squeeze, if needed, suffocate the Hamas leadership to release the hostages. Because remember in the beginning, in the beginning of the war, Netanyahu promised he will destroy totally Hamas. He will free the hostages, right? And he will de-radicalize Gaza. None of this happened. So he needs to deliver, because there are many circles within the Zionist entity that are calling on him to resign, take the responsibility for the failures of October 7, and so on and so forth. So he needed something, so that explains the attack on Qatar during Ramadan, which continues until today. And we have seen some reports, some of it rumors, that the U.S. is telling Qatar, expel all those Hamas leaders and do this. And many of these rumors, really, you look at it, it has some basis within those Zionists. I'm not saying that this is totally, made up. It has an element that the U.S. keep telling Qatar to pressure Hamas into accepting an agreement in this regard. But lots of rumors when you read, and as the Quran talk about the mentality of those Zionists in the Quran, it says سَمَّاعُونَ لِلْكَذِبِ. And for those who are not familiar with the Arabiya, سَمَّاعُونَ, it's not somebody who's listening. Somebody who's listening is استمع يسمع. But سَمَّاعُون is just like, this exaggeration to show, just like when you say Allah, فَعَّالٌ لِمَا يُرِيد. فَعَّال. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do whatever He wishes to do. There's no question about it, there's no doubt. So when it came to this, Zionist mentality, those enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah said they are سَمَّاعُونَ لِلْكَذِبِ. They live a culture of lies. They spread lies. They go to sleep with lies. They wake up on lies. And I'm going to illustrate a little more later on with this thing. So they keep bringing about many of these lies to try to further their cause. So what stands right now, the US have its CIA director in the Middle East. He went to Egypt, and from Egypt, he went to Doha today to try to bring about this ceasefire, which this will be the attempt maybe number 25 or 30 or 35. We lost count of how many. But this one is different. This one is different. And I'll explain why this one is different. Remember that we discussed at one point before Ramadan that Hamas came with a condition which says we are not gonna accept any ceasefire until, listen to this, until we have a guarantee that the war will not resume. That's it. The war is finished. If we have a guarantee, at one point they asked that Turkey will guarantee it, and the US will guarantee it, and Egypt will guarantee it, and so on and so forth. Because they know very well the mentality of those Zionists that, you know, whenever they make an agreement, they break it. That's their character. That's their history. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. You know what's really amazing? What's really amazing? When the Quran was revealed, so many ayat in the Quran, so many surah in the Quran covers the stories of the children of Israel. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us through the ahadith and through the Quran that those people, one day, they will be an issue for you. There were some general statements. وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا. If you come back to make ifsad in the earth, mischief in the land, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send on you our servants. That's in Surah Al-Isra. And there are ahadith specific that talk about them being on the west of the Jordan River. Okay? So it's amazing that, you know, for the Ummah, throughout its history until the 20th century, that aspect was not seen to be a lively issue that is alive and the Muslims would need to deal with it. And Muslims are supposedly equipped because there are so many verses that talks about their mentality, their way of life in details. From killing the prophets to saying that Allah is stingy and we are the people who have the money. Allah is poor and we are the people who have money. And they will tell Allah, you know, this is what you should have done. This is what you should have done. Just read the verses. It become alive of this mentality that is there. So when we look at this aspect of their culture, we see it alive. But what had happened, unfortunately, a year ago, it was a year ago, that they were at the peak, the ulu. The Quran talk about that you will reach a degree high in arrogance, where you have the strength, you have the money and the children, and you are either supported by Allah or the people. That's another interesting aspect in the Quran. That you cannot, as those Zionists claim that we can do it on our own. No. It's very clear. Whenever they are trouble, they call on Mama America. We have seen only last week when there was a threat by the International Criminal Court to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, Gallant, and Gantz, and Halevi. When this was a threat that this would be there and there was a rumor, suddenly Netanyahu came and said, this is a hate crime, this is anti-Semitism, only the US can prevent it. And we have seen congressmen and senators going to the ICC trying to convince them not to issue an arrest warrant for those criminals because of their crimes. One of their many crimes that would be a reason is stopping the food from reaching the people of Gaza. I mean, that's by itself is a big crime in this regard. Similarly, we have seen that when they run out of ammunition, they keep coming to the US, and the US have been supplying. So Biden and this administration, in one hand, they want to feed the children of Gaza. On the other hand, they are killing their parents and their grandparents. On one hand, they want to bring food for some of those people in Gaza. On the other hand, they are killing the children with American weapons. And we have seen that this weapon shipment continue by this government until yesterday. Yesterday, there's some news that a shipment was delayed. And this drove the Israelis crazy. It never happened for them. Now, if you remember, for about a month and a half or so, there was a talk that the American government and some senators and congressmen and women start talking about that the Israelis are violating human rights in their use of weapons, and therefore there is something that called the Leahy Law, where basically the US should not send them any weapons, or should at least put conditions. And that drove again the Zionists crazy. And for about few days, there was reasons to believe that something will be coming. And suddenly it disappeared from the news. And things went back to normal, that the government will keep supplying weapons. However, as of yesterday, if you read the Israeli media, it says that the US is delaying weapons shipment. And the Zionists are getting scared that this will be a new trend. Now, the American media have said that the US State Department have tons of material on the side talking about the violation of the Zionists in using the weapons and abusing the human rights. This has been in the American media for at least a month and a half to 2 months. Now, whether this will materialize in something, as they said yesterday, that in fact there is this delay in a weapons shipment, whether this will become a reality, whether this become an issue, remain to be seen. Because it's possible that this is a tactic of pressuring the Netanyahu government. It's a tactic, it could be just to pressure the Netanyahu government, make more compromises, don't go to Rafah at this point. I mean, the US government is saying basically, don't go to Rafah unless you have a plan. The US is not saying no to Rafah. Until now, the US is not saying no to Rafah. But they are saying, don't go to Rafah, don't invade Rafah unless you have a plan for the 1.2 million people who live in Rafah. And you can imagine Gaza, as we mentioned, the whole of Gaza, so-called Gaza Strip, not Gaza City, Gaza Strip, the whole of Gaza is smaller than Raleigh. And Rafah is a small city in the south on the border with Egypt. But when the war started in the north and the middle of Gaza, many people were driven to so-called safe area, although they were bombed in those safe area. But bulk of them ended up in Rafah. Now the government is threatening to invade Rafah and claim that we're going to finish Hamas, which is really funny because they have been at war with the north of Gaza for almost 6 months and a half until now, and they are still fighting in the north, which means that Hamas is not even finished in the north, although the north has been under the Zionist control for more than 6 months. So trying to finish Hamas, even the previous Shabak chief and other US and Israeli officials are saying, forget it, you cannot finish Hamas. I mean, until now, I think in one of the interviews that Netanyahu was talking about, yeah, we're going to do this and this and that, and just like what he did in the north and when we cleaned Hamas, and the reporter said, but there's fighting in the north. So, who's fighting? And he was not really composed to respond. Because basically, how you can fight a force that's looking to die when your own force is really sick and tired of the war and they do not want to go to the war. We have seen multi-reports in the Israeli media of soldiers, especially women, that are refusing to go to Gaza. And we have seen videos when the government pulled one of the forces from Gaza, Israeli soldiers, they were dancing and celebrating that they are no longer in Gaza. And of course, they will come and say, we have killed X number of Hamas. Again, absolute nonsense. At one point, they will tell you Hamas is 40,000, 30,000, 80,000. The number keep fluctuating because at one point they said, oh, we killed 20,000 of them. What do you mean you killed 20,000? Oh, some will say, we killed 10,000, 5,000. It just, those numbers do not make any sense at all, and they do not add up. Why? Because from day one, after October 7, the Zionists made a decision that they will not distinguish between a Hamas fighter and a civilian in Gaza. They will not distinguish between a man and a woman, a young or an old, a child or an adult. And that's why in the first 2 months and a half, 3 months, 25,000 were wiped out. May Allah accept them as shuhada. And there were at least 40,000 who were injured, other than those who are missing at that time. Now, the numbers are such that almost 150,000 are either attained shahada, killed, injured, or are missing under the rubble. And despite all of this, you come and says, oh, some of the percentage of Hamas people are this and that. How do you know? They have no idea what they are talking about. And the fact that in the past 24 hours, there was a good number of Israeli soldiers who were killed in Gaza and a bigger number that was injured. Just read the Israeli media. And some of these killings happen by throwing, one of those small devices from, Hamas said basically, Hamas and Islamic Jihad cooperated in fighting in one area where they killed and injured more than 15 soldiers. Another area, it's an entrance to Gaza, Ma'bar Abu Karam, that the Zionists themselves say that 3 were killed, and they put the pictures of them, and the hospitals, multi-hospitals, received injuries, which mean large numbers. This is only the last 24 hours. So given this situation, in this regard, you have seen that there was some moves And for the first time, Hamas have accepted to relax the condition, which says that we will not agree to something until there is this clear that the war ends. And we have guarantee for that. This was their position, again, for the last 2.5 months or so, and it did not really change an inch until in the past few days. So what's new in the past few days, and again, this is because the US have put its weight by keeping the CIA director in the area and having Blinken touring the area and going to Jordan and going to Saudi and going to meet with Netanyahu and company, is to say, okay, we're going to have 2 stages. We'll have 2 stages. In the first stage, we will release the sick and the elders. That is Hamas. At the same time, the Israelis would release an X number of Palestinian prisoners. And some of them were sent to hundreds of years. Of course, you know, everybody knows the maximum that you could live these days is what? 115 years, right? 120 years. But they sent some of those prisoners to 300 years and 400 years, and I think one of them I saw 1,600 years. Now, the Israelis have been resisting releasing those people. That, yeah, we will release, you know, prisoners. Now, remember that from the October 7 until today, the Israelis have imprisoned 8,000 people plus from the West Bank. It's from October 7 until today, mostly for no reason. They just come to your home, take you, and say that you are in administrative detention. This law, so-called administrative detention, is from the time of the British. So they just, you know, you choose whatever they like. And what it is that you are sent to jail for no reason. There's no indictment. There is no accusation. There's nothing. You are just taken from your home and put in the prison for 3 months. After 3 months, they can renew it for another 3 months. After 3 months, they can renew it for another 3 months. After the 3 months, and you see where this thing is heading. And there is nothing. I mean, they will have nothing. I mean, Sheikh Adnan Khadar, may Allah have mercy on him, who died inside the prison, who went on a hunger strike, saying basically, I have been in administrative detention for a long time. You know, either bring me to a court and, you know, get what am I accused of, or I'm gonna go on a hunger strike. He went on a hunger strike and ended up attaining Shahada inside the prison. And that led to the attack on some areas within Palestine by the Islamic Jihad last time, not this war. And as a result, the Israelis hit Islamic Jihad in Gaza at that time. So basically, they arrested more than 8,000 people from the West Bank. They will come and say, oh, we will release 8,000. I mean, those are the ones that, but of course, Hamas saying, no. We will need some people by name who have been in prison and who were sentenced for a long period for a reason or another, or what they have being accused of. In addition to this, the Zionists are holding a good number of what? Dead bodies. Dead bodies. That they're gonna bargain that, oh, we will release those dead bodies. So we have seen in Tulkarem is a city in the north, not far from Jenin and Nablus, we have seen that 5 shaheeds in one instance. 5 shaheeds. So the Israelis, those criminal Zionists, took 4 of them, the bodies, and under the rubble extracted the 5th and took it back, where they put it in refrigerators until a time come we'll say, okay, we'll release them, give us more of our hostages. Or we'll release them for something else. This is how the situation, and there are some bodies that have been there for years. For years, many years. Those bodies, people who are dead, they are waiting to bargain with them on something in this regard. Because they assume that there will be some bodies for dead soldiers or who were there in Gaza from the October 7, and they will say, give us 1 or 2 if you have whatever the number, and we will release X numbers. That's how the thinking or the plan is. So as I said, what's new with the proposal in the past 48 hours or so is that Hamas is saying, okay, we will accept that the Israelis do not commit to end the war in the first stage of the agreement. So basically, there will be a period of time where Hamas would release the women and the elders, and maybe some bodies, because it looks like the Israelis have killed a good number of their own hostages in Gaza. I mean, this is given, and the Israelis know it. And if you read the Israeli media, you will find some of the parents writing that it's our government that killed our children. Because remember the famous case, which was in fact on video, when you have basically three Israeli hostages in Gaza coming out after the Hamas guards were bombed, and it seems that they were, did not have any guards. So 3 of them came, and they were Israeli tanks. So they came, and they were raising white flags. What happened to them? They killed them. They killed them. The Israeli army killed them. And then the second day, they said, we are sorry, big mistake. We have killed our own soldiers in this regard. So this bombing, I mean, imagine more than half of the building in Gaza are destroyed. So there's a good chance in some of those buildings that you have some of those Israeli hostages, and they were killed with their guards. Some of them underground, some of them above ground. I mean, we know this from what we have seen so far in the media and in the videos in this regard. So Hamas is saying basically, we'll accept a first stage of exchange of hostages and prisoners and a period of calm. On the second stage, they said the second stage will not happen unless the Israelis commit to end the war. That's the compromise that Hamas have made in the past 48 hours. Again, for the past 3 months or so, they insisted, that is Hamas, that we will not get into an agreement unless the Netanyahu government commit to this is the end of the war. That's it. If there is this ceasefire, there's no more war. And the guarantees will come from Egypt, Turkey, and the US. The past 48 hours, there's this new development, and it seems to me that there are a few reasons for this development. One reason is satellite pictures have shown that there is a new gathering of Israeli soldiers waiting to invade Gaza. Rafah, I should say, in this regard. So this is a new element in this regard. But remember, before this, there was almost an agreement when Netanyahu came out and said, with or without an agreement, we're going to invade Rafah. And at that point, Hamas said no agreement. And they just left. And the negotiation broke in this regard. So it seems that in the next 48, 72 hours, things can move in that direction. So what is the second stage, basically? That Hamas is having a good number of soldiers. And they are saying that we will release in the first stage the elders and those who are sick. We will not release a single soldier. So they're going to keep the soldiers in case this thing did not materialize, and come and say in the second stage, are you committed to ending the war? If no, then there will not be, none of the soldiers will be released in this regard. So part of it, as we said, that there is this issue of Rafah, and if it happens, you can imagine how many people will die, how many people will be injured, and how many people will be, affected. Another reason is that Egypt and Qatar, working on behalf of the US, trying to get Hamas to moderate its position. And this would explain the change in the position. Because until, as I said, until recently, it was given that this is a condition that there's no negotiation over. So the fact that they are now saying that we can have two stages and the Israelis can commit to the ending the war on the second stage, they are really giving Netanyahu also something to brag about. Because if the Israeli government can get 33, that's the number, 33 hostages out, they can say, we have, by threatening Hamas that we will go into Rafah, we force them to release 33 hostages. And that's why there is also a good chance that the Netanyahu government will accept the first stage. But this will totally leave the second stage totally uncertain. Just like what had happened in the first exchange of prisoners. For a few weeks, there was a lull in the fighting, calm, and suddenly fighting flared up and continue until today. Now, why the US is pushing and interested in getting a ceasefire in this regard? Because basically, the US government is being pressured by its own stooges in the area. Not that those stooges can force the US to do anything, but it's getting to the point where this war have affected them in many ways. Make no mistake, Mohammed ibn Salman of Saudi, Mohammed ibn Zayed of the Emirates, Sisi of Egypt, Abdullah of Jordan, Mohammed al-Khamis of Morocco, they are working and conspiring with the Israelis against Hamas. Make no mistake. Those 5 countries, they are working and cooperating and supporting the Zionists, and they want them to finish Hamas. No doubt about it. Now you can come and say why the Hamas will accept Egypt to be, intermediary. They don't have a choice. Egypt is a heavyweight that is on the borders. And Egypt can suffocate Gaza. And they have been suffocating Gaza, by the way. You see, very interesting. I was talking to my children today. I said, whenever I see somebody meeting with Abbas, I said, why they are wasting this time? I mean, he has no value. You know, in Arabic, for those brothers and sisters who do not know Arabic, we use a term that's called صفر على الشمال. صفر على الشمال. What صفر على الشمال is, imagine we have numbers, right? Like, let's say 100, write 100. If I put 0 on the left of the 1, what does it do? Absolutely nothing. So I do not mention Abbas because really, you know, he is nobody. He have no value. He have no weight. He only is being used by the US whenever, you know, Blinken goes, he visit Ramallah, and Abbas was thinking, it looks like you are living here. You know, jokingly, you come too many times. Abbas only receive Blinken so that Blinken keep telling him, you need to keep the calm in the West Bank. And the American media is not hiding this. They say it explicitly. That, and Blinken stood in public, by the way, and praised Abbas for keeping the West Bank calm. So basically, you know, Uncle Sam, who is sharing the crimes of the Zionists, in public, the Secretary of State says that, thank you, Abbas, for keeping the West Bank calm so that the Israelis do not have to, you know, two areas of unrest to deal with, Gaza and the West Bank. The West Bank is limited. Yes, there are certain, you know, areas like Jenin and Tul Karam and Nablus and Hebron. You have seen some of this resistance, but actually Abbas and his cronies are doing their job in this regard. That's why I really, you know, there's no value even of bringing himself into the discussion. So sometimes you see him jumping and going and meeting with Erdogan or going and meeting with the Emirates or that. I mean, what he's doing is really he's trying to get money. He's begging for money because to make his so-called security apparatus, there are 70,000 who have weapons with him. Only 3 out of those 70s have used their weapons against the Israelis. Unless somebody's memory is better than mine. Only 3 in the last year. Only 3 of them. The rest of the time, the weapons is used against the Palestinians themselves in this regard. That's why Abbas is not really part of the equation. Let me go to another subject which is still related. The US, Britain, and some European countries came out about a month and a half ago or so saying that there is a need for a Palestinian state. And you have countries like Spain and others saying that they recognize or they will recognize a Palestinian state. The US government came and said they would like to see a Palestinian state that combines Gaza and the West Bank after Hamas is gone. And they came and pressured or ordered, whatever you like, Abbas to change his government and to come and say, we're going to reform the Palestinian Authority. Absolute garbage. There's no such a thing. It's the same, you know, gangs that run the West Bank that are still running it. If you bring Mustafa or bring Al-Ishtiya or bring whoever, the apparatus that runs the West Bank is the security apparatus, and they are working for the US and the Israelis. Abbas, going back to Abbas, he said on tape that the security arrangement with the Israelis, meaning the Palestinian being used by the Israelis, is a holy thing, شيء مقدس. Meaning, don't ask us to do anything in this regard. شيء مقدس. Basically, somebody said, I am an agent, and I will work to protect the Israelis. This is my duty. This is the agreement that I put, and this is a holy agreement. What do you expect of him? Of course, nothing except shar, evil toward his own people in this regard. What's new is, was it today morning or yesterday? No, yesterday, in fact, in the last 24 hours, there were a good number of developments, in fact, about Gaza. So suddenly, you have seen a picture. You have seen a picture in the Israeli media of what looks like Paris or Tel Aviv. Of course, when the Israelis want to brag about come and see, they said come and see Tel Aviv, because that's basically the center where they had, you know, those high rise. It's like, you know, their Manhattan in this regard. So there's this picture in the Israeli media that look like Paris, France, or Tel Aviv, but it's more beautiful than that, where they have lots of green stuff, high rise, and all of these things. Now, guess what is this? This is the Gaza in 2036. You know, in Saudi, they have this absolute nonsense called the Mohammed ibn Salman vision of 2030. They are wasting hundreds of billions of dollars for nothing, saying that they're going to build this city that's called Neom that will cost $500 billion. And they keep talking about all those fancy stuff. All of this, by the way, is garbage. Absolute nonsense. They have lost tons of money and did not get, alaykum assalam, anything of value. In fact, many of the dissidents who just left Saudi within the past years, they said that government keep wasting tens and hundreds of billions and we do not see anything. So the Israelis now, in their nifaq to Mohammed ibn Salman, who have the 2030 vision, they said we have a 2036 Gaza vision. And you look at the city that they are imagining, Gaza and the Strip, they're going to have those factories that compete with China. What? You know, you are imagining a Gaza that will be a center of trade, just like the old days. It will be a center of exporting Saudi oil to Europe. It will be a center of, and all of this, by the way, is just fit their description of سماعون للكذب. They are lying big times. Now, why did they come with this? Because when the European countries and the US saying there has to be a Palestinian state, and the West Bank and Gaza have to be work together to be one unit, and there will be a Palestinian entity, and this and this and that. And the US basically is telling Netanyahu, what's your vision for the day after? You know, this is what we are proposing. What is your government vision for the day after? So after, you know, we finish from Gaza. So at one point, they said we're gonna take over Gaza for X number of years and keep control. And the Israelis said, the US said, no way. We will not accept a re-occupation of Gaza. So he comes with this plan, which again, fantasy. I mean, it has nothing to do with reality. Absolutely nothing. He's talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. From where? Who gonna put it? Of course, he mentioned the Arab countries that are coordinating with him against Hamas. He wanna bring them into the picture, which means he wanna get Arab armies or Arab police in Gaza to be fighting and controlling Gaza and finishing Hamas if needed. Because the government now will fall if they do not go into Rafah. There's no doubt about it. Those ministers, they said if we do not go into Rafah, we'll bring the government down. which means a new election, which means he's in trouble. Especially that he is in court in Israel because he was indicted on corruption. And many politicians there and in fact in the US are saying he behaves according to his personal interest, not the interest of the country. So he comes with this vision, and some of you might have seen the picture. If not, just Google, 2036 vision, and you will see those, nice picture. In fact, people made remarks because there's lots of green. They said, look, there are 2.3 million people in Gaza. How come you will have many green areas? They said, of course, because they're going to kill the bulk of the people of Gaza, so there's not many residents. And this reflects a reality that, as I said, from day one, they made this strategic decision that they will not distinguish between Hamas and civilians. I mean, after all, they also made the statement, no food, no fuel, no medicine, no this, that will go to Gaza. That was from day one, clearly. And when South Africa went to the international court, they used these statements to show that those are war crimes. And what they are doing in Gaza is genocide in this regard. So it looks like from the onset of this, that this week will be a make it or break it. That either there will be something that will be worked out, or the preparation will be to invade Rafah, and then the disaster will be multiple disasters. This is the way that at least the scene looks now, by the compromise that Hamas have already made, alaykum salam, which again have resisted any compromise in the last 2.5 months. But as of the last 48 hours, we have seen a change. I do call it a significant change because it just make an opening that, yeah, there is an agreement. And this will be in the best interest of all sides. On the Israeli side, Netanyahu will say, I have freed 33 hostages with the possibility of others. And this, we gave our soldiers a rest before they're going to go into Rafah, and this and this and this and that. And on the other side, Hamas will be able to have some of those people in the south of Gaza and Rafah go back to their homes in the north and in the middle of Gaza and get more food and more supplies while there was a lull in the fighting. But again, what we need to really consider is this situation in the past week or so with the universities that we discussed in details on Friday between Maghrib and Isha. It's on the YouTube and the Masjid channel. You can see it. We discussed the universities in detail. So this is also making a waves within the Zionist entity. In fact, there was a meeting between the Secretary of Education and other organizations, which mostly including Jewish organizations, to discuss what to do about anti-Semitism. This is new today in the paper, in the Israeli press. And what took place is the following. 5 major Jewish organizations in the US boycotted the call. Why? Because there was some progressive Jewish organization on the call. They said, oh, we will not join the call because those people are on the phone call. So the phone conference was supposed to include everyone. When those 5 major Jewish organizations realized that there were some Jewish organizations that do not agree with them totally, they are not, pro the right-wing government in Israel, they are not really pro-Zionism, they are not this, they are not this, they dropped from the call, and that's why the secretary will have another call for them. This just shows you that those Zionists, they do not want anything to work. They insist that the US will keep supplying weapons and money to the Israelis. Their loyalty is totally to the Israeli government. So that when 21 senators voted against aid to Israel, AIPAC, the Israeli lobby in the US, I call it the Israeli, not the Jewish lobby, it's the Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobby, they said they're going to stop supporting them with money. Because again, their loyalty is not to this country. They are using this country as a milking cow to support the Zionist enterprise in Palestine. This is a colonial settler project. We need to understand this, and it's not there to stay. It's a matter of time that the demography in the area, the support from the West will have its limit, and then they will need to compromise or face the music, as they put it, in this country. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the khair, bring the khair to the ummah, and bring hidayah to the rest. I have only a time for one or two quick questions or comments. The elections is still about 2 years away but if the government come down, then they will need to schedule the election around October or so. No, it's not something that will be within weeks. So by the time there'll be the US election. Any other comments or correction or question before we finish? Yes, Ahmed. Raise your voice. In the Middle East, I will not call it significant. The matter there is much bigger than those decisions, but it's sending shockwaves within the Zionist entity. They are facing so many issues within and outside. In fact, even today they're saying that there were some entities in Serbia that rent hotels. Serbia, we are not talking about Serbia. The Serbs have slaughtered Muslims in Bosnia. We know this. They are saying basically when they have those Jewish customers coming for a hotel, they realize they are Jewish. They said, we cannot take you. This hotel does not take Jews. And it just tells you that the environment around the world is not really in their favor, so they need to deal with it in a way or another. Jazakumullahu khair wa barakallahu feekum. Thank you for being good listeners. We will see you inshallah next Sunday between Maghrib and Isha. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant nastaghfiruka wa natubu.